Hey everyone, so this is just a refresher session on the FMP design assessment brief, along with the guidelines for anyone who is doing the resits currently. So I just wanted to firstly go over, which I will say again at the end of the session, the deadline for these resits, which is on the 21st of August. That should not say Saturday, that should say Friday. The 21st of August is your deadline for these resubmissions. Remember, this is the last opportunity you have to resubmit your work for FMP design. We'll briefly go through the assessment. As most of you guys will have already seen this already, please do just forward the video a couple minutes ahead if you've already understood or seen the assessment brief and don't necessarily need a refresher on this. But the main things are the learning outcome, which I want you to pay attention to. And the first one is to recall basic research methods. Remember that the learning outcomes are what you are expected to evidence within your projects. Okay, so we should see an element of research methods that you will have been taught in term one for Introduction to Design, term two for Visual Culture, and of course ongoing in your term three for final major project. So how are you researching and what are the basic research methods that you're using for the project? You also, for LO2, need to demonstrate an understanding of concepts in business, design, and basic research methods in developing an innovative project. Just like the context and purpose aspect, as well as the lower section, what the brief asks you to do, the assessment task, you'll see that innovation comes up quite a bit. We want you to think about how you're taking two existing areas of research, bringing them together to create something new from this. And then finally, LO3, which is asking you to demonstrate the use of academic language and skills. And you'll do this through your annotation, which should be evidenced throughout your portfolio for your FMP design. We'll go down to the brief, which is what you'll produce. And you'll see that there is an overarching theme for your final major project, which is coalesce. And coalesce is where you bring two or more areas of research together, right, in design. So that's what we're asking you to do. The theme coalesce asks you to bring together at least two areas of research, disciplines or approaches, and merge them into an innovative outcome. I've put here some examples of different types of experimental research or innovative outcomes that could be developed based on your pathway. So for example, in fashion, maybe you're developing an experimental fashion collection that doesn't necessarily showcase something that has to be worn every day, but is really pushing the boundaries of silhouette and maybe textiles or material. You could be doing something like 3D modeling and digital form development. So throughout your workshops, you would have done things like VR, virtual reality. You would have used WOMP to develop 3D objects in those spaces. You could also do something like textiles exploration, focusing on sustainability. Maybe game students are creating an immersive game experience. That could also include character design that you build on for a specific game. Graphic design students could be doing things like traditional fine art practices, which include things like painting, drawing. It could also include things like digital tools, Photoshop, etc. But the main purpose of this is that you combine two ideas to create something original and meaningful to you, along with the kind of specialist pathway that you're a part of on your foundation. Throughout the term, we've encouraged you, well, not just FMP actually, throughout the foundation year, we've really encouraged you to be experimental and push the kind of boundaries in terms of taking risks with the designs that you come up with, but especially so for your final major project. At this stage, you will have missed the exhibition that happened in week 10 during the FMP term, which is okay. Although that is something you won't necessarily be assessed on at this point, you could still get a really good grade if you meet the other points for the submission requirements, which we'll go through next. So for the submission requirements, I've broken them down into 4 key areas. These also reflect the rubric, which is what you're assessed on. The first area is ideation. And so this is the beginning of your project. I want you to basically think and curate some ideas before you even start researching and developing an outcome. You want to start planning your kind of interest or exploring your interests. So the first thing that you're expected to show and evidence in your portfolio is a project statement. Usually this is just one page in your portfolio, and this should be approximately 300 words. We'll go through the guideline, which kind of breaks it down in more depth next. You should also include a mind map, which is a visual exploration of your ideas. This should include written aspects of your idea generation. So if in the middle of my mind map, I have architecture, maybe around my mind map, I'm thinking about all the different aspects of architecture. Is it minimalism? Is it maximalism? Is it brutalism? Do I like chrome aesthetics? And I'm really trying to think about all the kind of possible ways I could explore the idea that I'm coming up with my mind map. And so that's what your mind map should be doing. Your mood board, which you've done lots and lots of variations of throughout your year, but your mood board / color or texture board should be an aesthetic driven page, and it's a visual page made up entirely, or if not mostly, of images. So these are aesthetic inspirations. This could also include color research relevant to the concept that you're developing from your project statement. So in this section, the ideation section, you start with your project statement, which is your overview. You're kind of thinking about the direction you want to go for your project. And then all of these areas that follow stem from this section of your project. The next chunk of your FMP is research. So once you've concluded the type of direction you want to go for your design project, you now need to research it, and you need to do this very critically. I want you to think of a customer profile. So who are you making this for, this item for? Is it for a gallery? Is it for a customer specifically? Usually fashion students will create, fashion students or anyone who's designing a product would have a customer in mind, because you are selling to that customer. So we need to know things like the age of the customer, if gender, if that's important, the kind of income, right? So if you're making something that's really expensive, that cost, you've made a t-shirt that cost £150, maybe it's not suitable for an 18 to 21-year-old, because typically 18 to 21-year-olds aren't necessarily having the budget to spend £150 on a t-shirt. But maybe if it's a 27 to a 35-year-old, maybe that age range suits the product better. Equally, you are able to do a client profile, which works really well for anyone who's doing more fine art-based projects, or non-product based projects. So if you are developing an art piece, a sculpture, maybe you're doing a painting, that's not necessarily something you would sell immediately to a customer, but maybe it's something that you'd want to showcase in a gallery space, or maybe it's for a specific building or institution that's opening up that wants to that's given you a brief and require some artwork or some visuals that go there. So you kind of decide what works best for you, a customer or a client profile. We'll look at examples of this. The brief asks you to innovate within your project. And so I'm expecting to see some research regarding innovation or some sustainability as well. Typically, when you develop a sustainable idea, you are innovating. And we looked at some examples of that in week 1. We looked at companies like Milo, who developed a leather that's made entirely from mushrooms, a mycelium mushroom. And they are combating the need for real leather, which comes from cows. And we know that cows are the top 2 biggest polluters, cow farming, not cows specifically, but cow farming are the top 2 biggest polluters in the world globally. And so they're doing this to combat that. Now, the leather works just as good as normal leather. However, this decomposes once buried over a few months, which doesn't leave any kind of bad harm in the environment. So I've thought about a sustainable idea, but inherently it's become innovative, right? I've come up with a new solution to an existing idea. The last bit of the chunk of project research are your research pages. And I've said this should be roughly about 6 pages. This should include a mix of primary and secondary research. The best kind of projects include a mix of these research types. So 6 pages showcasing the artist design practices, mark making, samples, references, things like that will feed the development of the outcome you work on. We then move on to design development. So now you've done your ideation, you've done your research, you now have a chunk of work ready to inspire you to make an outcome. And so that's what the design development aspect of this is. So you should have around 3 to 5 pages, which include drawing, material explorations, and visual responses to the research that you've done previously. All of these pages should also include annotation or notes. These are essentially critical reflections that justify your design choices or kind of critically reflect on why you've decided not to make these choices anymore. So it allows us to kind of get an insight into your thinking. And then the last bit of this is the reflection, a written reflection on the skills learned and those you'd like to develop. And this should be approximately 200 to 300 words. Again, we'll look through some of the questions to help guide you on the reflection in the guideline. Lastly, we should have a page which shows your final outcome. And if you've made a physical final outcome, you can photograph this. If it's digital, you can just print it out and put it in your sketchbook before you obviously then scan your sketchbook pages to make them digital, and then you'll submit this on Turnitin. You have a maximum word count of 1,200 words, which is equivalent to around 20 pages for design students, 20 A3 sketchbook pages for design students. At this stage, you should already know the requirements regarding AI. But if you do not, please have a look through this in your own time. You have here a reading list, which could be really helpful for you to better understand any language that's been discussed in class, but also as inspiration for you as creatives, artists, designers, to think about things like colors, shapes, forms. I've also included a list of websites and podcasts. A lot of the websites we've looked at in class or used in class, but they can be really helpful, again, for further inspiration, or just tools to help with design. For example, BehanceNet, we've looked at a lot in term 1 and term 2 for your second day practical workshops. And this is also a really great tool to help with the development of your portfolio, getting inspiration, etc. To my earlier point about the breakdown that matches the rubric, which is here, I'll just zoom out a little bit. So ideation, project research, design development, and your final outcome. This is how you're marked. And so please do make sure you read through the language here that's used so you kind of can really reflect on your own projects and be honest with yourself and say, does what I have meet these different grade brackets? Does it fit the language that's used? Am I showing little or no evidence, or am I showing excellent generation of refinement of my ideas? Where does my kind of work sit within this grading bracket? So as promised, we're going to look through the guideline, the FMP design guideline, but I wanted to just show you where it is on Canvas, just so you could look at it in your own time as well. So you should have your Canvas page already, even if you are resitting, it will be on the exact same area as your standard FMP Canvas page. And there's a tab here that says how you'll be assessed. If you click on that, it will open up to this page, and here you have the assessment brief that I've just shown you. And then here, if you click this, you can download the assessment guideline, which is here. And this is a guideline, so it's not an editable file, it's a PDF, and that's intentional because obviously you are designing your projects in a physical sketchbook. Other than if you are doing games design students are doing this digitally because of the nature of their course. And that will be explained to the game students by your lecturer. But the graphic design and fashion students, you guys are doing this in a sketchbook. Everybody, however, should use this as a guideline, not as a template. So I've made it quite easy. I've made a little key for you. So the red text is text for you to delete. It's things that you don't need or require on the page that's guiding you. And any gray text is something for you to um, change, right? So you'll put the name of your project, your student name, your student ID number, the group that you're a part of, and your cohort, as well as a major project, which is the name for this unit. For your first page, you're then asked to develop your project statement, which is discussing your project concept. And I want you to describe in around 250 to 300 words what it is you intend to create, develop, or research for your project. Remember that the project should be centering innovation or sustainability. It doesn't have to be both. It could be one or the other. So here I've put some questions to help guide you on what you should write for your project concept. So firstly, what is the idea for your project? You do not need to write this as though it is final, but I want you to write it as though you are willing to explore and experiment with an idea that you have. So what is the idea for your project? What has inspired you? The techniques you'll use, what primary and secondary research will you conduct? We obviously did a trip in week 3. We all visited the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is in South Kensington. And then we also went and visited the Design Museum, which is about a 15-minute walk away. And this was just to get some primary research. Of course, you can go off as well and do primary research wherever you're based in and around London. Primary research can really come from anywhere. It could be on your journey somewhere, maybe on the train, you've seen something, you've taken a photo, you've seen something, you've drawn from it. Don't just limit primary research to art and design spaces, because you should be able to get inspiration from pretty much anywhere. So that's what that question is asking you. In terms of the techniques you'll use, you've learned a series of techniques throughout term 1 and term 2. So what kind of techniques are you really interested in experimenting with? Is it CAD? Is it virtual reality? Is it using the 3D printer to print 3D objects? So you need to explain to us the techniques that you're willing to explore for this. And then finally, what will your final outcome be? Are you wanting to create an art object? Are you wanting to create a fashion collection? Are you aiming to create a product? So explain the kind of direction that you're wanting to go for your project. Remember, what you do for the project concept should be reflected throughout the rest of this project. So this is really important that you spend a lot of time ensuring that you're focusing on getting this section correct, because then the next 2 sections should be really easy for you to follow. You've done mind maps many times before, so I won't spend too much time going on this, but just like the project statement, I've put some questions here, not for you to necessarily answer, but just to guide you to think about when making your mind map. Just like with most pages, I've also included example mind maps. They don't all have to be as animated or graphic as these ones are, as this one is, sorry. It could be a more minimal or simple one like this, but it should reflect the project concept that you're developing. So what is the central theme or main idea? That's what you're going to start with in the middle of your mind map. And if you remember previously, I gave the example of architecture. But whatever your main theme or concept is, you'll put it in the middle. And then you'll go off on different branches, exploring all the possible ideas that you can explore based on your main theme or idea. Your mood board should contain primary or secondary images. It could be a mix of both. It's completely okay for this to be entirely secondary as well. But it should definitely reflect the mood and aesthetic that you're trying to create for your project. So even if we didn't have what is punk on this mood board, we'd get a sense that the project is quite punk-led based on the images, the color choices, the accents that are on this page here. Same with this, we don't have any kind of written context other than time to play. But what we do have is a tennis ball. We have here in the background a tennis court, and we have here a racket with someone with a headband behind it. This gives us a very good idea that this project potentially is going to be about tennis or some kind of sport, right? Your texture board or color board depending on what pathway you're doing or what you're making. Some people may want to make both a texture board and a color board if what is you're developing is textural. If you aren't making anything that's textural and it may be completely digital, then you don't need to worry about a texture board because we have your mood board, but do focus on the color board. And the color board is telling us quite literally the colors that you're going to use for your project. And so here, if we look at this color board, it still fits within the theme or concept that you've developed, but it just outlines the colors that you intend to use or look into for your project. This is really, really helpful because although it can seem limiting, what it does is it gives you a further clear direction about what is possible for your project. Okay. So then, if you're focusing on chrome and grays and blues, if you see something that's pink, it probably won't fit right for your project. So it gives you a little bit more of a tunnel vision for the outcome of your project. As we spoke about earlier, the customer profile. So I've given you here some questions to think about. To answer this, you will need to answer and write on your customer profile page. It should include photos, not of necessarily one person, but of the type of person that would buy into your product or design. Equally, if you're doing a client profile, the same thing should apply. Maybe you'll have a photo of the institution, a photo of the family that may have hired you to do the project, the gallery, whatever it is. And then you should answer what it is that they're expecting from you. What is it that they want from you? Did they give you a specific color palette? Is there a specific brief? So all of those things should also be answered in the customer or client profile. You then have your innovation research page. I'm happy for your innovation research to happen consistently throughout your project rather than being on one page. But if you prefer, you can make one page that shows us the direction you're going for your innovation. This could include researching existing brands, designers, art practices that include innovation and that you'll directly be inspired by. This then is just a series of pages where you'll place your primary or secondary and secondary research, okay? So again, it gives you some questions or thoughts that you can think about to include within your page. And a small example of what a past student's primary, secondary research page looked like. So you can see here that she's gone and taken a photo of I was going to say Eiffel Tower then. That's not the Eiffel Tower, that's Big Ben. And she's drawing from this, and you can tell that from this research, she's going to be really interested in the architectural aspects of landmarks within London, right? And so we get a sense of that here in the primary research. Your primary, secondary research pages should have research images, which include photos, as well as annotation and a response, a drawn response to the research that you do. The drawn response can be a direct response to what you're seeing, or it can be something that's a little bit more experimental based on the direction of your project. This goes on for the 6 pages that are required for you, and then you go to design development. And the design development pages, now that I have all my ideas, I have all my research, I'm going to use only the pages from my ideation and research in my sketchbook to inspire the development of my product. And you can see that happening here in the example, as well as a different layout of what this student is doing. And this goes on for 3 to 5 pages. You'll then have your page where you showcase your final outcome. And this is how a student who has done a fashion collection has decided to showcase her outcome. Typically in fashion, we will do a lineup of 6 looks. And then this is how a graphic design student has showcased their outcome, and they have decided to make a physical lamp. You can see the clay work that they've used as an option before they've turned it into a digital 3D rendering of their lamp design. The final thing before your bibliography is your reflection. And like I said earlier, you have here a series of questions to help you answer the reflection. Feel free to choose 3 or so questions to answer. And this should help to guide the reflection of your project. So what were the strengths or weaknesses for your project. Be completely honest about this. Remember, it's just a reflection. The more honest you are in this section, the kind of better grade you'll get, because it shows that you're really thinking critically about the things that you've done, the mistakes you've made, the wins you've had. Did you encounter obstacles? And if so, what did you do to overcome these? Sometimes, towards the end of a project, mistakes happen and it may not turn out to, in the way that you desired. But having a good reflection really shows that, you've understood where went wrong and you've learned on how you could improve that the next time round. Did you conduct strong primary or secondary research? If not, what would you do next time to better combat that? And what would you have done differently? So choose 3 or so questions, definitely a minimum of 3 questions, as you're aiming for around 250 to 300 words for your reflection. And then last thing is the bibliography. So any references that you've made in your project regarding the use of AI, you absolutely need to reference in your bibliography. If you've not directly referenced an artist or designer in your research, you should also put them in your bibliography. And if you've gotten any text from anywhere that is not yours, also please include that in your bibliography. But of course, in the earlier stages, like your mood boards, etc., I don't necessarily need you to reference all of those images in your bibliography. That's the end of the guideline. I just wanted to go back to Canvas just to show you also the weekly content. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll go through week 1 just so you better understand where to find things. If we firstly click on the week overview, you'll see what happened in the class each week. And if you click on class material, you'll be able to download the slides that we've looked at, as well as here again, the design guideline, which I've just shown you, which is the PDF document that shows you what should be on each page. But this is really helpful because it gives you further context into the types of things that we're talking about. So when I say examples of innovation, we have examples here, and I've given you 3 examples which you can use or reference as a guideline. But what's also really good is the online content section, because this gives you direct links to the websites that I was talking about, a lot of which are in the reading list in your assessment guide, assessment brief, along with the study skills, which give you even further context. So here, if you're stuck and you're unsure about what a concept development is or how to go around doing that, we've made some really fun interactive slides here, which you can click through. You can also play this with audio. If you don't want to read it, you can just click the audio setting and play with audio. And this gives you just a kind of further visual guideline of what it is, what it means to build a concept. And you can also click on a lot of these images for further information. So each week we'll have one of these, and I think they're super helpful, especially if you've missed any of the weeks leading up to your submission. If there are any questions, please feel free to send me an email. You will have received an email from me this week anyway. So just respond to that email and I'll be happy to help you or set up a one-to-one tutorial to go over any questions or look over any projects that may be complete, ready to submit for your resets. Thank you, guys.